Alrighty. I remember way back when Dr. Johnny Presley came and spoke on a Sunday morning, and he made a really good joke about, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. He had surgery on his nose, and he had a bandage across his nose that day, but he was clever enough to direct to something else, and I'm not that smart. So what I'll say is this: Jesus wore sandals. So when he taught, I'm pretty sure. Yes, sir. Yep. So I am wearing flip-flops and khakis. So I could say, well, part of me's still in Florida, maybe. But anyhow, so I had a little procedure done on Monday, and I have a follow-up appointment tomorrow, so hopefully I'll be able to get this monstrosity off my toe and just be able to have Kelly fix it up for me. What is it? Can you tell when someone rolls their eyes from behind? Could you all see that? You know, this Kelly, right, this one. That's good, that's good. All righty, well, I've set our goal for this is to be able to have this kind of understanding of the things we've been talking about in order to use it. And again, it's the things we've been doing on Sunday night, equipping ourselves with the ability to have conversations to where maybe you'll be able to work this stuff in. So where you'll have an opportunity to present your case. So tonight we're in Lesson 7, which we handed out a couple weeks ago. I've got one or two here if anybody needs one. Does anybody need Lesson 7? It's the existence of God and morality. Angela does? Okay. Yeah, I got 3 copies here. Anybody else need one? Did you find yours, Nancy? You find yours? You good? Okay, I heard 6. I wasn't sure if you had found 7. So we are going to do that tonight, and we'll see how we should be able. I'm thinking we'll be able to get through this lesson, but then again, you never know. Yeah, go over 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so that being said, we've talked about. We began with understanding of the what and the why of apologetics. From there, we talked about the relationship between faith and knowledge. And the more that I've been thinking about and mulling these ideas over, the faith and knowledge lessons have really been important for me personally. We talk about the relationship between faith and knowledge and how that understanding, I think, has just been a really, really good way that we were able to dig into it. From there, we went into the arguments for God's existence. We started with the cosmological argument, or the argument from cause and effect. And so we've been working with what are called logical forms or syllogisms on this so that we can have a basic understanding. So, anybody but Mike, what is the first line? What is the first line of the cosmological argument? I hear papers are shuffling. Yes. She said everything that begins to exist has a cause. Excellent. What's our second line? Began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Okay, excellent. So, in those 3, where do we invest our time and study? And line 1, does it take a long time to prove that one? Why? Well, that's the line 1. Line 1. The first line, everything that begins to exist has a cause. An adequate cause. Remember that we could say that an adequate cause if you wanted to add a little understanding to it. But I don't even think you really need to go there. But if you wanted to say an adequate cause, why don't we have to spend a lot of time providing evidence for that? It's axiomatic. It's evident. I mean, from a 4-year-old to a 94-year-old, cause and effect. It's a law. Right? So that's an easy one. Line 2 is where we need to spend our time and make sure that we have evidence for the universe began to exist. And so you brought up the laws of thermodynamics and things like that. There's lots of secular science that backs up the idea that the universe began to exist. And then logically, because of our logical form, then line 3 has to follow, right? Therefore, the universe has a cause. Okay? Now, what about the cosmological argument? And we understand, what do we understand about the nature of that cause? We said there were a number of things that are evident about the nature of the cause when we understand the cosmological argument. Give me one. Okay, so timeless. Okay, that's actually within the teleological argument. So hang on to that. Immaterial. So we could say spiritual. So immaterial, so it's something not made of stuff. So timeless, immaterial, spaceless, right? So something that is not exactly. Well, and what else? As we studied the cosmological argument, we looked. Yes, so there has this being, whatever it is, this first cause has to be powerful. I mean, the universe itself. I mean, remember adequate cause? The effect, the cause has to be greater than the effect. The effect can't be greater than the cause. So, powerful being, incredibly powerful. Powerful enough to create the universe out of nothing. So, powerful, what else? There's one more that's important that we don't think about. Okay, yes, highly intelligent. Absolutely, incredibly, because we see so many things so powerful and intelligent. Yep, there's one other one. We've already said that one, but that's good though. What'd you say? No, this would be a non-contingent being. It has to be eternal, because if nothing existed, if nothing is all that ever existed, then nothing is what we'd still have, so there has to be something eternal. That's good. There's one more I'm thinking about. You guys are good. This one's a little obscure. Remember, it's personal. A personal being. What do we mean by personal? The concept of personhood, which is bound up in the nature of God. So we understand that because a volitional choice was made to create. So we have a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, all-powerful, all-knowing, personal, eternal, infinite being just from the cosmological argument alone. That's pretty good. So from there we move to the teleological argument. And Warren, that's where we get the concept of design, what you were saying. So the first line of the teleological argument. Yes, every design had as a designer, right? And so what then do we say about line 2 then? What's line 2? Yes. Shows evidence of, appears to be, is, shows evidence of being highly designed. Therefore, the universe has a designer. We spent a lot of time on this. And so that's the teleological argument, is the argument from design. And that the complexity of the universe, it demands something that would be able to design all this complexity. There's no way it could happen by accident or chance. It's not possible. You want to work out the mathematics on just a single cell organism and that becoming what it is. We talked about the concept of irreducible complexity in the bacterial flagellum. What was the flagellum? Its tail, right? It functions like I knew Larry would get this, the boat thing, an outboard motor, right? And so, actually, would it be an inboard? I think it'd be an inboard motor, because the engine and the components are contained within the unit, and then it has its propelling device on the outside. Is that inboard? I want to say that correctly. So in order for that bacteria to survive, it has to move. In order to move, it has to have a properly functioning flagellum. And for the flagellum to work, you have to have all the parts there in the proper sequence and in the proper way that they are constructed for that to work. And it's really quite magnificent. So we talked about that. So the idea of from design. So we've got two powerful arguments here that tons of evidence. So again, every design has a designer. Do we have to spend a lot of time with that? You have to have a lot of time. Do you have to spend a lot of time trying to understand how to prove that? No, right? Because you could look at anything, painting, whatever it is that's been designed or created. You could say that's easy to figure out. It's axiomatic in all circumstances. Second line is where we need to invest some time. So we spent some time doing that. Where did we look? We looked two primary places to understand design in the universe. We looked like our universe itself, the cosmos, and then we looked within ourselves, right? And then we looked to the animal kingdom, and then to the insects. Remember the little bombardier beetle? That little dude's awesome. Yep. So we consider all those things absolutely design. Now we're going to change gears a little bit. And so it's the same basic concepts. New word. What was I even trying to combine with basic? Basical? Practical? I don't know. The basic ideas and the same form, logical is where I was going. The basic logical ideas, it's the same form, but we're going to apply it to the existence of God and morality. Now, it is a well-known fact that actions have consequences. It is also a well-known fact that beliefs have implications. What a person believes is the main force behind a person acts. Now, this that we call this term worldview. A person's worldview informs everything that they think, that they do, and how they feel. A person's worldview is everything that impacts them to make decisions, the way they think, the way they feel. Everyone in the world believes that some things are right and other things are wrong. And that is absolutely true. Thus, every person has some system of morality and ethics. Now, someone might say, no, that's not true. I'm sure there's places where they don't believe anything's right or wrong. They're completely neutral on everything, right? Punch them in the mouth and see if they're completely neutral. Don't really do that, but how would they feel at that moment? They would probably feel, hey, that was wrong. Or help yourself to their wallet. They would most likely say, hey, that's wrong. That's mine. So when we boil things down, every person has some semblance and a system of morality and ethics. So as we begin to study in the importance of the origin of morality and ethics, a brief definition of terms is in order. The English term morality comes from the Latin term mores, meaning habits or customs. Morality, therefore, is the habit of following the rules of proper conduct. Ethics is from a Greek word meaning character. Now, I've heard it described this way. And the rest of our lesson is not going to follow this completely, but if you want to think of it in this way, I like this, and I believe it was R.C. Sproul that broke it down this way, is that morality is the way that things are lived out in our societies. It's the expression of a person's ethics. Now, or the word he uses talking about mores, about that which is the habits and customs. So there might be a society where the morality or the customs of that society are really wrong. What's accepted are really wrong. Let's give an example. Cannibalism. It's accepted in some societies, right? Very rare. But we would say that's wrong, right? Has anybody seen Frank? Where'd Frank go? Yeah. Sorry, that's wrong. Anyway, Lord, I apologize. Yeah, okay. I'm not doing it. So if you don't know that reference, I don't know. It's not the best movie, I guess I'd say. But anyway, so that's what's actually played out in society, and what's accepted as right was termed as morality. Ethics, or the ethos, is what ought to be. And so the way that Sproul explained it is ethics is the standard of what is truly right and what's truly wrong, but morality is what plays out in society as to what's... So he made the distinction there. The way that we're going to talk about ethics and morality in this sense is that, in theory, they should go hand in hand. What ought to be, according to God's standard, which we're ultimately going to trace the origin of what is right and what is wrong back to God's character and nature, what ought to be then should be played out in the area of morality. But unfortunately, so in this lesson, in the way that we read it, ethics and morality are going to be spoken of synonymously. Everybody with me? So, let's keep going here. So the standard dictionary definition of ethics is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad, or right and wrong, a group of moral principles or a set of values. Ethics, then, is the system that a person uses to determine what things are right and wrong. Morals and ethics deal with proper conduct, duty, and virtue. If you read a lot of the old philosophers, you know, if we talked about Aristotle, we've talked about Plato, Socrates. They will talk about virtue. They use the word virtue a lot. In fact, our founding fathers, that language comes forward, and they use the word virtue a lot. And that's in this area of morality and ethics. So morals and ethics deal with what? Proper conduct, duty, or virtue, or in short, how we ought to behave. The question now before us is, how should we behave? Now, the more that we get into this, this is a powerful argument for the existence of God, and we'll see why. Now, if concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong, do exist, how do we go about determining whether a particular thing is right or wrong? At times, people do not agree on the exact way to decide whether something is right or wrong. However, everyone agrees that some things are right and other things are wrong. Morals and ethics are universally accepted traits among the human family. Therefore, their origin must be explained. So, this is an important thing. We've talked about this on Sunday nights about the Columbo tactic that we looked at was reversing the burden of proof, right? And in reversing the burden of proof, you're putting the onus, you're putting the responsibility on the other person that you're talking about. You're putting it on them to ground their beliefs, for them to give logic and reason as to why something's true. And so when it comes to morality, if somebody says something, well, that's evil, they must be able to express from an atheistic perspective, if there is no God, if that is their point of view, then why it is wrong or how it is wrong. And so ultimately what we're going to see, and I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag here, is that an atheist has no way to ground right and wrong. It's completely subjective. And so with an atheist person that you're arguing, it's completely subjective, then this is a powerful argument against their position. Because they have to be able to say that this is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. And they're not able to do so because it's completely subjective. Let me give you an example. Hitler. Okay? There were people, including himself, that believed that they were absolutely, positively right in what they were doing. They believed that their actions were in fact righteous in exterminating an entire people group or number of different people groups. Anybody that didn't, and what they were carrying out, they believed to be a righteous cause. They believed that they were right. Well, how then can you say that they were wrong? Think from their perspective, how would you go about doing that? It's not easy, right? Because they believe they were right. Well, they were wrong. Well, why were they wrong? Yeah, so there's nothing they can point to other than, well, I guess they're the ones who had power. See, morality and ethics in our day and age, when there's no objective source, it's whoever has power. Absolutely. That's why we see things that were absolutely positively wrong according to society and law. Now they're okay. And vice versa. There's it ebbs and flows and changes. Well, how's that possible? How can right and wrong change? Well, yeah, we understand that. Yes. What ought to be? Right. Right. Ultimately, abortion. We believe, absolutely, according to an objective standard, that abortion is wrong. But the mores or the mores or the morality that's played out in our society today says, no, it's right. Because that's who has the power. And who's made... See what I'm saying? Every law is based in an ethical notion. It just depends on whose ethical notion is the law is based upon. So we have a lot of variance in how things play out.
Right.
Okay.
You'll have one case where the state will go ahead and will try somebody for double murder when they kill a pregnant woman, but they fund the doctor that performs that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's an excellent example. So what we're looking for is an objective grounds for right and wrong. If it's not objective, then it's completely there's no ultimate way to say what is ultimately right and ultimately wrong. Now, we'll get to why here in a little bit, that the fact that everybody knows that there are certain things that are right and wrong actually prove God's existence. We'll see how that comes together. So, Morals and ethics are universally accepted traits among the human family, therefore their origin must be explained. Simply put, there are only two options. Either morality and ethics originate from the mind of God, that's our position, who is the source of all goodness, or they originate from within man himself. That's your only two options. Right? Because if it has to be something outside of man, or it has to be man himself, and those are your two options. If we are left with man himself, then it's just a matter of evolutionary principles and who has the power, might makes right, majority, 50 plus, whatever majority is. That's what determines, depending on your society. We've talked about this before in other subjects. He who wields the sword is the one that determines what is right and wrong, and normally they're looking out solely for themselves. So one thing for certain, the choices that we are being required to make today are becoming increasingly complex. Should we approve of abortion? Should we encourage surrogate motherhood? Should we advocate the death penalty? Should we recommend euthanasia? We will not be able to answer these and other similar questions in any meaningful way by relying merely on our individual intuitions or emotions. Neither will we be able to answer them by appealing to the past. In many ways, the problems facing us today are unlike those that faced generations long since gone. How will we set our standards? The person who refuses to recognize the existence of God has only one choice when it comes to explaining morality. It must have originated within man. However, since man is viewed as little more than the last animal produced, by the long, meandering, chance process of evolution, this becomes a problem. Think about this. From an atheistic perspective, you're just simply the highest animal on the food chain. So a lion is not plagued by guilt after killing a gazelle for its noon meal. It's not. There's never been a lion walking around after it's got its belly full going, man, I just don't know why I did that. It was so wrong. A dog does not experience remorse after stealing a bone from another dog. Yet man, who is supposed to have evolved, feels both guilt and remorse when he commits certain acts that violate accepted standards of morality and ethics. If our society were based on the concept of godless evolution, this earth would be a miserable place to live indeed. And in fact, the places where that is the prevailing worldview, misery is the rule of the day. Dr. Richard Dawkins, our good friend, the famous evolutionist of Great Britain, that was sarcasm in case, don't write good friend there. Unless you italicize it and put sarcasm. Once admitted that believing in evolution and then acting consistently upon that belief would produce, quote, a very nasty society in which to live. Why does he say that? He's saying that if we live evolution out to its logical conclusion, one of the basic principles of evolution is survival of the fittest. So basically means what? What does survival of the fittest mean? Okay, get rid of all the undesirables. Who succeeds in the survival of the fittest? The fittest. Another way of saying that is might, strength, power. That's what dictates what's right and wrong. And when those things are the dictating forces of right and wrong, this world is an ugly place. He says it's a very nasty society in which to live if we follow evolutionary theory out to its conclusion. We say indeed it would. Some years ago, another well-known evolutionist, Dr. Desmond Morris, wrote a book, The Naked Ape, about the evolution of man. That title brings to mind an interesting question. I was going to make a joke, but I'm not. Since no other animal throughout evolutionary history has been able to locate and live by moral standards, should we somehow trust man as a naked ape to do any better? Matter by itself does not have the power to evolve any sense of moral consciousness. If there is no purpose in the universe, which is the position evolutionists are forced to take, If it's all time and chance, then we're just the product of dumb luck and chance. Then there's no purpose behind everything. You are a purposeless, meaningless, hopeless, walking bag of chemical reactions that are subject to stimulus and action. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to live, right? So, matter by itself does not have the power to evolve any sense of moral consciousness. If there's no purpose in the universe, which is the position in evolution as a force to take, there is no purpose to morality or ethics. That's ultimately true. Unbelief, therefore, must argue, and does argue, that there is no ultimate standard of moral ethical truth, and that, at best, morality and ethics are different for everyone. That's the position they have to take if they're going to be logically and intellectually honest. So what they do is they say, well, it's just a product of evolutionary processes, and that societies develop according to evolutionary processes. And so ultimately, there's no true right and wrong. It's just a matter of where are we evolving to. And so it just depends on who's controlling that process, about what's accepted as right or wrong, and where you are in a certain place in time in history. So if that were true, who could ever suggest that someone else's behavior was wrong? See, think about that. If there's no ultimate right or wrong, then how can you say that something is right or wrong? How could we have any real meaningful laws of any kind? We couldn't suggest that someone else's behavior was wrong, or that person ought or ought not to do something. The simple fact of the matter is that unbelievers cannot explain their origin of morality and ethics. Whether the unbeliever is willing to admit it or not, if there is no God, then man lives in an environment where anything goes. When the famous author Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote his book, The Brothers Karamazov, that one, Karamazov, Karamazov. He had one of the characters, Ivan, remark, quote, "If there is no God, everything is permitted." Oh, how true. If evolution is correct and there is no God, people can do anything they want, which is ultimately the reason evolution began, the idea. That was one of the, and it's ultimately why it's perpetuated today, is to create a state of affairs where there is ultimately no right or wrong. People can do what they want. Unfortunately, if they carry their logic out to its complete conclusion in the reality that they've constructed, then they have no basis for saying anything is right or wrong. With no way to reach a rational conclusion on what is ethical, man finds himself lost on a sea of despair where might makes right, where the strong crushes the weak, or where each man does what is right in his own eyes. That sounds familiar. The book of the Bible? Yes. Morals and ethics without God is not a pretty picture, as the following investigation of some different systems of morality documented all too well. So let's look at relativism. Relativism. Now, relativism, for example, says that there are no universal rules for determining morals and ethics. Since all value systems are considered to be the results of culture and environment, one system is just as good as another. No one system has the right to claim it is the correct system that men should use to determine their actions. Now, let's think about this according to the current global scene. If this is our understanding, this is our position, then how should we conduct ourselves? Let's think of ourselves in the world political scene. How should we conduct ourselves? With anything, right? Is anything that China does right or wrong? North Korea, any problems there? Middle East, the way women are treated within Islam, any problems there? Little girls being taken, 8, 9, 10 years old to be wives? No problem, right? How can we say anything? How can we say that's wrong? Can we? Ultimately, if that's our perspective? We can't. We have no grounds for saying something is ultimately wrong if this is our worldview. But see, here's the thing. When I say an 8-year-old little girl is taken to be the wife of some Muslim man, every one of you is probably feeling a little bit of something inside. Anger, disgust. Why? Because it's ultimately wrong according to an objective standard. We'll bring up some real extreme examples that will show this here in a little bit. So, according to relativism, if a society wants to kill all children 8 years old or younger as a means of population control, no one can say legitimately that is a wrong thing to do. Or within the womb. It's funny how things kind of evolve and progress, right? Because not too long ago, I can't remember the exact time, they were pushing for, well, if they're under a year old since they've been born. Was that in Tennessee? Was somebody in Tennessee? I can't remember the lawmakers that were trying to put forth, was it Virginia? Yes. Put forth a bill saying that up until a year. Well, if it's up until a year, what's it going to be eventually? 2 years? Yeah, and the same thing on the other side of the thing. You're a burden upon society, right? And we see that taking place within government-controlled medical situations, right? They determine whether or not you're valuable enough to society to whether or not you could get a certain procedure or not. We'd rather do that for this person rather than you. So if that certain society says all children 8 years old or younger as a means of population control, no one could legitimately say that is a wrong thing to do. However, all humans know that some things are right and other things are wrong. All humans know. It is difficult, if not impossible thing, indeed, to find a society where a man is applauded for betraying those who befriend him, willingly murdering his own children, or committing treason against his nation. For this reason, very few people are willing to defend absolute relativism. Well, how about hedonism? Hedonism is a philosophy which claims that the aim of moral conduct is to achieve the greatest possible pleasure with the least amount of pain. In fact, one famous atheist, Aldous Huxley, said that he had his own reasons for insisting on a society where meaninglessness reigned supreme. He wanted a world with no meaning, he said, because he felt that morality interfered with his sexual freedom. You don't have to read between the lines of such a statement to understand his point, do you? Hedonism basically says if an action provides pleasure to the person who is doing it, it doesn't really hurt anyone, then it is acceptable. Now, relativism takes this idea even further, says you can do something that's pleasurable and it can still hurt somebody and there's no real way to say it's right or wrong, period. Now, this qualifies that a little bit, but I'm gonna speak about something that it's offensive. It's a terrible thing to think of, but you guys remember Jeffrey Dahmer, right? He took pleasure in what he was doing. He felt what he was doing was right, and it felt good. Ultimately, with this position of no objective source of right and wrong, can't say that he was wrong. You can't. You have no grounds to say that he was wrong. I can't imagine anybody saying that what he did was right. But this is where we need to understand, reversing the burden of proof to the person that says there is no God. Well, then you can't say anything's right or wrong if you say there is no God. That's where this ultimately goes. So we consider the ultimate consequences of this kind of thinking when we talk about hedonism. Sexually transmitted diseases are occurring in huge proportions all across the globe. Teenage pregnancies are rampant. Babies are born already infected with deadly diseases such as AIDS because their mothers contracted the diseases during their pregnancies and passed them on to their unborn children. In many places, divorces are so common that they equal or outnumber marriages. Cities are filled with rapists, stalkers, child molesters. What else, pray tell, will have to go wrong before it becomes apparent that attempts to live without God are flawed? So that is relativism and hedonism. What about utilitarianism? Yes. Sure. Right. Well, certainly. Yeah. Right. So the hedonist would argue here. Yeah. The hedonist would argue, well, he hurt somebody. They would say, so we talk about these things that are called, like, they would talk about this as victimless crimes. You know, if it's just me, then it's no big deal because it's just me. The relativism would say that Dahmer was wrong. The hedonist couldn't say that. So they've added the qualifier of as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. But still, ultimately, that's a slippery slope. Because who defines what hurts somebody? You still have no objective grounds for that. Okay, utilitarianism is a system of belief which suggests that good is determined by what produces the greatest amount of pleasure for the greatest number of people. An accurate explanation of this view is found in a book by Catherine Tate, the only daughter of renowned British agnostic Bertrand Russell. In the book And My Father, Bertrand Russell, Mrs. Tate described what it was like to live in the Russell household with her brothers. She commented, for example, that her father firmly believed that parents should teach a child, quote, with its very first breath that it has entered into a moral world. Well, that sounds good, right? But as any evolutionist would, her father had great difficulty in defending such a position. Miss Tate recounted in her book the fact that as a child she would say, I don't want to, why should I? When her father told her she ought to do something, she observed that a normal parent might respond by saying, because I said so, or because your father says so, or because God says so. Admittedly, however, Bertrand Russell was not your normal parent. He would say to young Catherine, because more people will be happy if you do than if you don't. Her answer was, so what? I don't care about other people. Oh, but you should, her father would reply. In her youthful naivete, Catherine would ask, but why? To which her father would respond, because more people will be happy if you do than if you don't. In the end, however, Mrs. Tate wrote, quote, we felt the heavy pressure of this rectitude and obeyed, but the reason was not convincing, neither to us nor to him. Would it be convincing for any rational human being? No. Because ultimately people are going to do, especially if they don't live according to God, they're going to do what's best for them, what feels good to them. The other thing we can look at here is situationism. Is the idea is that something is right because a person decides it is right in any given circumstance. So here's how this works. It's the situation which dictates whether something is right or wrong. So it might be wrong in this set of circumstances, but it's okay over here. Because the situation dictates what is right and what is wrong. I'll just be honest with you. I think sometimes as Christians we kind of get sucked into that a little bit. Well, it wouldn't be so bad in this circumstance. It's probably okay. But in this circumstance, I would never do that. Either it's right or it's wrong. So situationism is the idea that something is right because a person decides it is right in any given circumstance. According to this philosophy, there's nothing that is always is right or always is wrong. Each individual situation determines the correctness of an action. If a sane man, therefore, decided it was right in a certain situation to kill his business competitors, how could we justifiably ask someone like the police to stop him? On the contrary, some things always are right and some things always are wrong. Situationism is not worthwhile philosophy because it cannot deal with moral absolutes that are recognized by all humans as both legitimate and necessary. Furthermore, when two people find themselves in a real life, quote, sticky situation, and one wants to do one thing while the other wants to do something entirely different, who then is right? Without any system of absolute, who gets to choose? Who gets to choose? That's right. One with the power. Last one we're going to look at, as my toe is determined, this class is going to end here, with determinism. That's funny. Determinism is the idea that man is not really responsible for his actions. This belief claims that the long evolutionary process has instilled in man certain instincts that determine his actions. So determinism is the logical conclusion and the honest logical conclusion of evolutionary understandings and process. So Richard Dawkins, if he holds to his guns, is a determinist, saying that you are just a compilation of your instincts and actions that determine according to those instincts. According to this concept, then, a person can do anything that he feels like doing and not be held responsible for it, because it's simply determined by your instincts, your chemical reactions, the things that drive you, as just a accidental blob of from the goo to you via the zoo, right? So that's all you are. Then you're not held responsible. For example, if a person steals something, who is responsible? Determinism would claim that his evolutionary past is responsible, or that his genes made him do it. Yet common sense tells us that every rational person is responsible for his own actions. Else, why would we bother having laws, police, courts, judges, or jails? Okay, so we're going to have a little snippet where we pick up next week with the practical impact of morals and ethics without God. And then we're going to get into yet another logical syllogism based upon these ideas that will help us in understanding the existence of God. See, so far we've talked about different worldviews and different things, the way this plays out with people. But the question ultimately is, how does all this prove God? And so you'll have to come back next week for that, where we will connect the dots. Okie dokie. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yep. Right? Exactly. The situational ethics. They're trying to apply, yeah, that's a great example in the abortion argument. They'll try to argue whether or not the baby was conceived according to incest or rape, and saying then therefore that life is ultimately expendable because it puts the mother. So it's based on the situation. Great point. Yeah. Sure. Yes. Now that is the argument. That is the argument that was made in our Sunday night discussion with. Yes, he brought that out. Yeah, very excellent way of saying it. So logically, logically speaking, we should still be able to exterminate this life, but just happen to get through, But because, that's an excellent point. Again, situational ethics. Very good, very good. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Why do they not think then that why didn't the human race stop? If we started from a
Right.
evolved to arms and legs and
Right.
this, why aren't we still developing a spatial
Okay. Well, I think, I think they would say we are still evolving. We just haven't. We don't have enough time to see, because it takes millions and millions of years for things. I think they would plan it. I think that answer would come to the time factor. They would pawn it off on that. Is that we'll see it eventually. Should the human species survive long enough, we'll see ourselves evolve. And they still talk about us in terms of that we're evolving. In fact, evolutionary ideas have permeated almost every aspect of our existence. Law, the way that we think about law, the way that we think about a lot of things in our world today have been subjected to the evolutionary thought. But I think they would pawn it off on the time factor, saying, well, we are, like they could use sports, for example. Athletes are getting faster, stronger, that kind of stuff. They would say, well, they're evolving. I think they would pawn it off onto that. And just say, give it enough time, we'll see something down the road, the ultimate human existence. I think that's what they would say. Or whatever the next form is. Okay. Great questions. Appreciate it. All right. Well.